guys, welcome to another edition of the Immigration Live Q&A. I am your host and I guess the founder of this whole process, Mark Holthe, Canadian immigration lawyer. I am grateful to have you joining me in another edition of our live immigration Q&A. In the early days, the live Q&A actually was all based on express entry, and that's where it all got started. But as we've seen so many questions coming up with people looking to travel, understanding the travel restrictions, trying to make sense of all of this, I decided to open up these live Q&As to cover all areas, which obviously travel restrictions tends to be a large part of it, and immigration processing. So as I invite people in, you can see here Taha is letting your friends know that it's going live. Do that as well. Go ahead and just tag your friends, let them know that we're going live, because it has been it's been interesting to see what Facebook and what YouTube does to promote this when it actually happens, when I go live. So when you guys do your part to get the message out, it just makes this so much better. Now, as I go forward with this, let's give a shout out. We've got Karen who's tuning in here, connecting on YouTube. Welcome, Karen. It's great to have you. If you're posting questions, hold off for a little bit. We will get to those questions in a second. And when I say post your questions, that's when you can race to get them posted. But if you can see here, we're just doing some introductions here, identifying where people are tuning in from. So please post in the comments where you're listening from. You're most guaranteed to get a big shout out, like Jian here, who's tuning in from Myanmar, which is awesome. The reach and how far we can actually get this message to the world is really, really cool. And I love my new Ecamm Live software. You know, as I'm working on, I've got a new little camera here that I'm working with, which is also kind of fun. And so it's allowing for a little bit better video quality, which is awesome. Let's see here. Karen says it's early morning here. Yes, it is. I know. And you guys coming on, being live means a ton. We've got Hattie here from Germany. Karen says the volume's a little bit low on YouTube, so let's see what we can do about that. So you guys are my technical advisors. Okay, let's see. Actually, I've got my intake up. I'm gonna turn this up a little bit here and just see how you guys are hearing me. See if it's, and I can see, yeah, the audio is a little bit lower. I've been doing a lot of changes with my system just to try to make sure that what I'm doing is giving the best video and best audio. So I'm gonna try to turn it up just a little bit more. There. And I can still see it's still a little bit lower than what I would like it to be, but we're not too bad. I think we're doing okay. I'm gonna make one more little adjustment, and I appreciate you guys' patience as I'm working through this, because it's not always super easy to kind of configure everything and get it working properly. Let's see if this adjusts it at all. If I increase this up a little bit, I'm gonna do one more thing here, also on this side, to try to help it increase the volume. But maybe what I need to do is just get my mic up a little bit closer and just talk a little bit closer into the mic. So that is the little audio video check today, and thanks so much for your patience. I think that should be a little bit better, and I'll just talk a little bit louder too. Okay, so thanks, Karen. I appreciate that. Okay, let's see. Amna says, how are you and your mom? My mom's doing pretty good. Her garden's growing. She's staying busy. And I actually have to get over there to see her today. So maybe I'll hop on my bike if the rain stops coming down, and I'm going to go see her. Okay. Okay. So Ralph's, I'll give you a shout out from Edmonton, my friend. Thanks for always joining. Mecca, you bet, from Nigeria. Okay. Karen says, I got a message on Facebook about you going live, but I prefer YouTube because there's a 5-second lag on Facebook. Great tip. Those of you who are watching it, if YouTube is just better than Facebook, then by all means, go over there. As you know, we're also broadcasting to Periscope, and so there's a lot of different avenues I'm trying to get the message out. Okay, Hina says, would you please reply me? Yes, Hina, I'm happy to do that if your comment makes it into the list. All right, we've got someone from India. Great. May is tuning in from Qatar. Awesome, May. We've got Chuck, who's Edinburgh, which is great. Yash, hey, I think Yash, you're probably the first time. I don't remember your name from Buenos Aires. Excellent. Hey, we've got someone from Lethbridge, Camilla. Thanks so much for joining. Arjun is India. Jude, big shout out to you, Jude. Great to have you connecting from across the ocean. Talk is up in Grand Prairie. These are my Alberta contingent. Awesome to have you guys here with me. Fantastic. Yash has nice background pic. Thanks. We've got another Mark. Great name out in Vancouver. Fantastic. Anbu is Miami. Okay, Amir says now voice is nice. Great. See, and that's, just give me the shout out. You guys are my technical advisors. All right, fantastic. We've got someone else from Toronto. And Karen says on the Kona, off to see mom. Good man. Absolutely. Okay, Talk's confirming the audio is good. Okay, those of you, we've got Marlon who's in BC. We've got Shan who's in Trinidad. Welcome. Amir, Egypt. Fantastic. Thanks for joining. Let's see here who else we have. We've got a good morning Mark from Anu. Thank you. And let's see here. Let's see. We've got Rahat from Bangladesh. And Jatin is in India with a nice flag there. Fantastic. Kenza, there's Rwanda. Neni's Nigeria. Mansi is in India. Awesome. So there we go. There's a big shout out. We've had an opportunity to get everybody to connect in. Today, what I wanted to let you all know is that we have received just recently, just as of yesterday, some really good news for some people who are separated from family. So the announcement that came out just recently from our Prime Minister that then was kind of codified in our website, the IRCC website, is that they have relaxed some of the travel restrictions for immediate family members of Canadian citizens or permanent residents. And so I'm just going to switch over here and share my screen with you all. Okay, so you can see here, this is, and maybe I can make this just a little bit bigger. Perfect. So as you can see here, changes to the travel restrictions apply to family members of Canadian citizens and permanent residents. What is the big deal about this? Well, in the past, these family members needed to show that they were traveling for a non-optional or non-discretionary purpose. And so when you apply that to a family member who maybe is not currently living with their family member in Canada, even if they could get the ability to get on the plane and travel with a visitor visa or an ETA, the border officers would often refuse them if they weren't already living in Canada or had an intention to be returning to their central location of residence. And so, for example, my friend here in Lethbridge, my friend Curtis, who I know he doesn't watch these videos at all, but he's been separated from his wife in Peru for a long time. Well, now, because of this notification, if she's able to board a plane, can now come to be with him in Canada. Now, with that being said, there are a lot of other things that have to take place. The individual needs to have a visitor visa still. The individual needs to have an electronic travel authorization if they don't otherwise have it, in order to be able to board the plane. So that's still an important component to it. And there's still the realities of foreign visa offices that are struggling with everything from biometrics or other requirements that are still creating impediments. But for people that have those already in place and are able to get, say, the letter of authorization to travel that they can obtain from the consulates via email. If you have questions about that, you're in that situation, it's really not something I can describe the whole process here in the live video. Just book a consult, connect with me, and we can do that. And I think everybody for as long as I can remember, whoever's watching this knows you just go to the holthylaw.com website, click start here, and then you can book a consult with us. But with all of that going on, if you're able to get on the plane and travel, you're no longer going to face that barrier as a family member of coming in. Now, I'll have Igor maybe post this link on both of the sites for the news release where it talks about it that happened on June 8th that our Prime Minister announced. And it talks just basically about, who's a family member, a spouse, common law partner, dependent children. So that's, under 22. Parents, step parent, grandparent, those kinds of things, they also fit. So, so parent, or I should say, let me qualify that before I get ahead of myself. Parent or step parent, or the parent or step parent of the person's spouse or common law partner, and then a guardian or tutor also fits into the mix. But where the rubber hits the road is actually this site right here. So you want to search for coronavirus, disease, COVID-19, visitors, foreign workers, and students. This is actually probably one of the most helpful sites that you can go to get your questions answered. And the reason, if you scroll down, you can see that they do a really good job of breaking it down. So restrictions and exemptions for travelers. It talks about that that processing isn't happening normally, that the accurate processing times are not even being posted because everything is in such flux. And they emphasize here that they're prioritizing Canadians trying to return, vulnerable people, people who perform or support essential services. So they are playing a really, really important need. So I see a lot of people that are posting comments. Hold off on the comments, okay? I will let you know when you can post them in just a little bit. And when I say post your comments now, then I will start following them from that point on. So it doesn't do any good to post your questions just yet. So hold off if you can. All right, we're going to go through this teaching session because maybe some of your questions regarding family reunification, which is the highlight of what we're doing today, they may just be answered. So listen carefully as I'm going through this. As we circle back and we continue going forward, you can see here for visitors, true visitors, you might not be able to travel to Canada, even if you have a visitor visa or an ETA, and we'll get into why that is. But then it talks about who is eligible to travel. And you need to understand this is really important. So foreign nationals, including U.S. citizens, can travel only if they're eligible. And then the restrictions vary depending on where you're coming from. So if you're traveling to Canada from the U.S., then you must be both exempt from the travel restrictions and traveling for an essential purpose. But here is the exception. This is the thing that's just been announced. Whereas before, if you go back and watch the video that Kyle Heineman and I did on the border officer, the CBSA bulletin that they use to determine who can come and who can't, what's considered to be essential or non-optional, non-discretionary, which is the proper terminology, family members were often being excluded if their purpose of their travel wasn't deemed to be essential, like I talked about before. But you can see here an immediate family member of a Canadian citizen or permanent resident who is staying in Canada. So the citizen or the permanent resident is staying in Canada. They're coming to stay with their Canadian citizen or permanent resident in Canada for at least 15 days is exempt and can travel to Canada for any purpose. The reason they're saying 15 days, well, if you're coming and you're being you have to follow the quarantine and the self-isolation rules, you have to self-isolate for 14 days. Well, if you're going to be traveling back before those 14 days, then it serves no purpose. So 15 days is what they say. So theoretically, you self-isolate for 14 days, and then you've got one other day to go visit whoever you're going to, to go do whatever you're going to do. So if you've got an important function or activity that family member wants to attend, you need to plan out. You need to make sure that you're traveling to Canada to make sure that you have time to do that, to self-isolate and quarantine yourself for 14 days, and then that extra time to go to or attend whatever event or thing, purpose that you're actually in Canada for. Okay, so pay attention to that. If you're traveling directly from the US, you can see here, must be for an essential, non-discretionary purpose like I talked about. Once again, the exception applies. If you're already in Canada, you can see about the options in terms of processing. There's stuff here for international students, which I'm not going to get into at great length. And you can see here, they've also identified that online courses won't affect your post-grad work permit program eligibility, which is really important. And what that means for you students out there is that if you do have to go and start your studies in advance online before you come to Canada, that you'll still get credit for that towards your post-grad work permit. So if you've got a 2-year program and you take up to 50% of it, and as we scroll down, you can see here, begin your classes outside Canada, complete up to 50% of your program, then, that 1 year, if you've had to do that outside, you can still count that 1 year together with coming to Canada, finishing your program. When all these travel restrictions are lifted, you can then get up to a 3-year postgrad work permit. So any of you international students, if you have more questions about that, don't hesitate to reach out and book a consult. Okay, so this is kind of what I wanted to focus on. And one of the things you can see here as we look at these exceptions, What is missing from this? Okay. And this is where I've got a client right now. She is just battling. She's working so hard. She's currently separated from her husband, and she and her son are here in Canada, and she knows who she is. But she is here on a work authorization, and her husband had to go back overseas to deal with an urgent family matter, and now he's stuck because they are not allowing him to return. These reunification of family only applies to Canadian citizens or permanent residents. So all of the old rules continue to apply for someone outside of, through the orders in council. Unless you can find an exemption and you can get around that, that non-discretionary, non-optional entry, then, you can travel. But in this case, for this client, they're still facing that same issue because she is not a Canadian citizen or permanent resident in Canada. Neither is her child. And so that barrier is still there, which is really frustrating for a lot of people. But at least for our Canadian citizen with their international spouse, whether they're in the US or in Peru or wherever, or, children or other family members, this is good news. And so slowly, you're starting to see positive things unfold. And we just hope that, the trend that we've got here, at least in Canada, is going to continue to go in the way of opening things up. But we're still experiencing tons of processing challenges. The visa offices in many countries are still operating with a skeleton crew, which means your applications are being delayed. Now, I'm going to give you one other big bomb of a tip, or just pulling back the curtain on immigration. The one thing I want you guys to understand: some of you are in Canada, have an express entry application in the queue, and are it's been languishing, and you see all of your friends who are, and I'm just going to shift back to the regular view here. You see all of your friends who are having their express entry applications completed. They're being landed by, these new email notifications. Congratulations, you're a permanent resident. Well, understand that there are reasons why you may not have your application being finalized in the same time frame as your friends. One of the main reasons is if you have a family member that's outside of Canada, then immigration has basically parked your application, because there is challenges with the overseas missions, the overseas visa offices. If you have dependent family members that are included in your application that are looking to come with you, that's why your application is stalled out and it's not moving forward. So right now, that's the reality. And so there's the answer if you're looking for it. Whew, wow, that was a lot. Okay, so I'm going to jump down now here, and I'm going to tell you guys. Okay, let's put this one in here. This is the frustration that many people are, and my 2 cents. Great, we'll put it on there. More delays on our sponsorship application. Thanks for nothing, COVID-19. Yes, and you guys in that situation, I feel for you. I've got many spousals. Any paper-based application are also being parked. So they're not actively working on these. But your concerns, my 2 cents, are valid. And I understand the frustration. But on the flip side, I can tell you that I have a number of express entry candidates, express entry clients, who are so grateful in the exact opposite way to you for everything that's happened. Because these Canadian Experience Class draws, these CEC only draws, are now allowing people, like a client I just obtained yesterday. They received an ITA with 441 points, which is phenomenal. And they never, ever dreamed that was going to happen. I never dreamed it would drop down to that level for people in Canada. So people that had no pathways previously, they now actually have opportunities that they never would have had but for this situation we're in. It's super unfortunate. And the challenges and the positives and the negatives that have come from this, clearly there's way more negatives. And my heart goes out to all of the frontline healthcare staff. My heart goes out to everyone out there who is suffering, who's had family members pass away, who have been their businesses have been shuttered. The economic costs have been astronomical, every bit as much as the health costs. And we're not talking just physical health, but mental well-being. So COVID-19 has wreaked havoc on our world. But there's little hints of little, rays of sunshine that have been shining down on some of my clients who didn't think they'd ever have an opportunity to immigrate to Canada. All right. Okay, so good. You can express those angry faces. That's totally fine. Okay, so let's get into your questions. I guess a couple things as I'm transitioning. So everything after my 2 cents here, and we'll see. Yeah, we've got Facebook coming and YouTube questions. So you can post your questions now, and I'll start looking at them after my 2 cents, and I can hear pop, pop, pop with everybody posting their questions. But I do want to let you know that there are a couple really, really good things. One, remember always the course, guys. If you go to this my firm website and you type in the code purchase now, you can get access to my express entry complete step-by-step course to doing it yourself. You punch in code EEDIY50, apply, and voila, you'll get 50% off. So I'll give a shout out for that. And then I also wanted to show you guys those that travel a lot and have a lot of time on their hands and can listen versus just they can listen as opposed to just viewing via video. I recommend you go to my Canadian Immigration podcast and watch and listen to my most recent videos. So I've got Canadian Business Immigration Part 1 and Part 2, which were recently released, which are excellent. And they cover all aspects of immigrating to Canada as an investor, entrepreneur type individual. So you want to check that out with my good friend Jeffrey Lowe. There is a ton of content on that. So if you are not currently eligible for express entry, your score just doesn't rank high enough because you maybe your age, maybe you're a little bit older or you don't have a master's degree or something like that. Some of these options may be ones that you might want to consider. Okay. All right. I think everything is, as far as announcements go, I think that's what I wanted to share. So go check that out. You can watch it on iTunes, Spotify, a bunch of other places. All right, so let's, and of course, I'm not even sharing my screen with you guys. That's a classic example of me not paying attention to what I'm doing here. Okay, so there's the podcast site, Canadian Immigration Podcast. Episodes Part 2 and Part 1 have been released. They're super full of information. And then here, like I said, with my express entry DIY guide, it's actually a do-it-yourself course that I've got a special 50% offer. So take advantage of it. Every day I talk to people, and any client who hires me gets free access to that complete guide. But this is something I want to point all of you express entry people point out to you, because repeatedly people just don't understand, don't appreciate what is in here. So don't ignore it. It's there for you. Okay, let's get back to answering questions now. We'll flip back to this screen here and let's see what we got from our amazing viewers here. Okay, first one. Okay, Raby says, so students can apply for a study permit for September, fall 2020 intake? Well, you can always apply, but ultimately, is the school holding classes? And if your school is not holding classes in person, then technically you can start your program outside of Canada and get credit for it up to 50%, which we'll see how this unfolds, but at this stage, it's really quite good news. Okay, Singh says, any draw predictions for the upcoming draw? CEC, FSW, and how much the score will be for CEC candidates? Okay, that's a good question. So let's see. I predict that it will be CEC only and a CRS score of 436. So there's my prediction. Let's see how close I get, because that's all it is saying. It's a prediction. I think there's merit to it until the travel restrictions are in place that allow people to come. And you've seen that right now, as up until the end of June, those travel restrictions are still going to be in place. So I do not anticipate that there's going to be an FSW draw in the next round. So if it's CEC, we just had one at 440. I suspect it's going to be lower, and we have a lot of candidates in that group. So for Canadian experience class, wouldn't surprise me if it drops down to 436. So that's where I'm going to go. All right. Sumaya, good to have you joining in from Morocco. Okay, Masood says, hey, Mark, what is the processing time? So crazy long for some visa offices. Example, visa office in Abu Dhabi takes 39 weeks for work permit application. Yes, understand this is just a product of the realities that we're dealing with. Skeleton offices, the fact that biometrics was limiting who could come, the fact they parked applications. And unless, and if I go back here, I'm going to share, I'm going to take that off. I'm going to go back here. We're going to go back to here. And you can see when it comes to processing, you can see here, we're prioritizing some applications, including Canadians trying to return to Canada, vulnerable people, and people who perform or support essential services. So if you have a skeleton crew, you only have just a fraction of the normal officers you have to process applications. Anything that's supporting essential service, they're getting the priority, and everybody else, if it's not essential, are just basically stuck. And I got work permit applications all over where people are stuck, and we're just waiting pending the approval of the work permit. And that's even when they've already completed the biometrics. So it's a reality, unfortunately. All right. Okay. Next one on the list. Okay, Chamod says, hey Mark, will IRCC process visas much faster given the fact most businesses are slowly reopening across provinces? It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the number of officers available and whether or not the social distancing is going to allow those officers to return to the office and deal with paper-based applications and all of the other ones that have been held in abeyance. But it's going to be a long time before those processing times start to come down, and that's just a reality. Okay. Okay. This one is a little bit more personal, but hey, they asked the question, so it's open. Okay. Faltu says, Mark, I have a serious concern that if a person is suffering from herpes, which is an STD, then after going through the medicals, will she be allowed to migrate to Canada? Okay. The most important thing to realize is that a person can be inadmissible to Canada for having a contagious disease, as well as causing excessive demand on Canadian health or social services. So typically it comes down to, from the demand side, the treatment of that. With respect to communicable diseases, if they're treatable, then usually they're not going to be an issue. But getting into the depths of that particular medical inadmissibility, Faltu, that person would need to probably book a consult with me for us to look at that in detail. So I can't say yes or no whether or not they'll be allowed to immigrate, because every single person's situation is different. And just because you have one condition doesn't mean it's treated equally across the board for everyone. So, yes. So when it comes to answering your question, which was a creative one, haven't gotten one of those before, understand that really you are in a situation where there'd be a case-by-case determination. Also understand, guys, that usually when there is a question of medical inadmissibility, always, they will send you a PFL, a procedural fairness letter, which gives you an opportunity, if they determine that you may be inadmissible for medical reasons, you often will have an opportunity to respond to that. All right. Okay, Angie, hello. Good to see you. Okay, Camilla says, I'm expecting my first baby in August. Congratulations. I would love to have my mom and dad come from Brazil to help me survive the first couple of months. Does that mean they would now be able to come? I'm a PR. Yes, Camilla. That's exactly what it means. If they're able to secure the authorizations, whether it's, and this is generally for every country, not just Brazil, but if they're able to have a temporary resident visa if they need one, or the electronic travel authorization, then yes, they are not going to be barred as your parent of a permanent resident from being able to come. So that is good news. But remember, there's still the whole issue, all of those factors that apply with respect to ties to your home country, showing that you will abide by the temporary conditions, all of those same, when it comes to the genuineness test of the purpose of travel, all of those apply. And remember, Camilla, obviously, if they're coming to help with the little one, they're going to be staying for longer than 15 days, but that is the minimum. Good question. Okay. Kaushik says, should we request pre-authorization from CEC if my wife has approved dependent work permit? My wife is coming for settle with me because I'm already in Canada. Is this considered essential? Okay, so this one here, Kaushik, pre-authorization from CEC if my wife has approved dependent work permit. I'm a little confused, Kaushik, as to what you're asking here. My wife is coming from settling with me already in Canada. When it comes to you, and you're not a permanent resident, so the same restrictions still apply. So the flexibility with family members joining you still is, it only applies to Canadian citizens or permanent residents. So for you, I'm assuming, Kaushik, that you are your work permit. I think I'm in Canada. Yeah, I can't tell if you are, I'm assuming you're not a Canadian citizen or permanent resident. So then in those circumstances, you'd have to be able to show that the purpose of travel is essential, and it's not easy. So what are some of the ways? Well, obviously, if she's coming to work as a nurse in Canada or a healthcare professional immediately in support of the fight against COVID-19, well, that's probably a pretty essential purpose. But it's case by case, and there's so many different factors at play. Kaushik, once again, I recommend a consult, and we can talk about it in length. Okay, Victor is shifting gears here. Hey, Mark, my title changed a while ago, but duties are the same. My knock is still the same. How the letter should be given? Well, if it's with the same company, you can indicate the title. I always separate the duties so that they know both of those titles both fall within the same knock. The only way they can do that is by assessing meticulously, line by line, duty by duty, matching up with the profile. So in my letters, Victor, I break both positions down if it's for the same company and include all of the essential information for each in 2 separate blocks. That's how I do it. Okay. Okay, my 2 cents. I'm going to get back to you, and I know you're frustrated. When you have a spousal that's been refused and you've appealed it and you've been successful, I know how heartbreaking it is. I really, truly feel for you. And, when it comes to everything that's going on in your situation, seeing that they're just, they're pending, they're not moving forward, I can only imagine how frustrating it is for you. And all I can offer at this time is just a recognition and an acknowledgement that it's unfair. It really is. And I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what it would be like to be separated, especially with all of the travel restrictions on top of it, and to have gone through the process of fighting the refusal and now having everything just stuck. So I'm so sorry about that. It's just a real tough thing for you to deal with. Okay, Pooja says, I worked as a volunteer from December 2013, and my 18th birthday falls April 2014. So do I start my personal history from my 18th birthday or from the day I started volunteering? Personal history is from your 18th birthday. So that's where it starts for you. Okay? Okay. And the beauty part too is some people post comments that are not worth putting on there. So I can just skip past them. So if your comment was skipped, well, understand I have a choice as to what I want to put on here and not. Okay. And my 2 cents, you've asked a number of other things. So you've been married 3 years, living apart the entire time. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Okay. Ivania is tuning in from Hamilton. Husband's in Ecuador. We have a spousal sponsorship processing. Can you apply for a visitor visa now with these exceptions without issue? Thank you for all you're doing. Okay, so you are a permanent resident, right? And I'm assuming you are. You could be a citizen as well, Ivania. Husband does fit into the category of a family member. But understand, even though technically on the face the travel restrictions do not apply, you still need to be able to satisfy an officer of all of the concerns that they usually have with a visitor. And this is where it becomes complicated. And there is no one way of explaining this in detail. But understand, when you are dealing with the travel restrictions, they are separate and apart from the underlying eligibility and assessment that goes on with even issuing the TRV in the first place. And you guys know, many of you who have gone through the process have looked to sponsor a spouse or have been in a relationship with someone. When you're a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, often immigration will say, oh, you're in a relationship with a Canadian or a permanent resident, you probably want to go through permanent residence. And they use that as one of the factors in determining whether or not to grant you that temporary entry as a visitor, because they say, well, if it's temporary, that's fine, but you're in a relationship with a Canadian and you're probably looking to stay long term. So even though, Ivania, on the surface, you as a permanent resident, your spouse, if there isn't a TRV in place right now, you've got a spousal sponsorship in the queue, it's often very, very difficult to get it approved. But there's nothing stopping you from applying. So I'd encourage you to give it a whirl. There's nothing stopping you. It is not going to harm your permanent resident application. Okay. Okay, this is a tense one. This one is from CF. Hi, Mark. How do you justify an error in employment in a prior visitor visa that was refused because they believe I wouldn't go back? I accidentally swapped months when filling the form. I want to apply for EE. Well, CF, I am a full proponent of always being honest, always. And when you have inconsistencies in previous applications, I always disclose it. if there is, now I obviously make sure that everything is fully included in the current one, but I will often identify an error that was made in a previous application depending upon the circumstances if I feel it would help the case. And once again, it's all case by case. So specific situations like your CF, I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly how to deal with it, but generally speaking, prior visa refusals are not going to harm you, so you're always going to disclose that. But inconsistencies in other applications, there's many representatives, consultants out there and otherwise that tell you don't worry about it, it's not worth worrying about. But you do need to pay attention to it. And in some cases, I will take the extra step in a letter of explanation to say, here is my work history. Please note in the previous visitor visa application that I know you have on file, Canadian Immigration Officer, I made this mistake. You can see I inverted the dates, and it was a clerical error. Doesn't impact this application, but I just wanted in full disclosure to let you know. So I go to those lengths. Okay, House here says, hey, I got an ITA and filled travel history. Came to Canada as a student and currently working here. Went to my origin country and US. Should I write all my trips from origin country in Canada and US or only US trips? Okay. This is where I take my own position with travel history. The way I approach it is immigration wants to know where you are physically present at all times. So the way I deal with it is anytime where you have an address listed somewhere, you obviously need to have addresses listed with no gaps for the past 10 years. Anytime I'm traveling away from that address, even if it's back to my home country, and other people may take a different position, and that's totally fine. But for me, if I'm going back to visit my family, but I'm really going to school in Canada, if I go back home to visit family, I put that down as a travel history, even though technically it is my country of origin. And so technically you don't need to put it, but it just makes things so much more easier for me to explain to the officer what's travel, where I'm living, and it removes all the complexity. So that's how I deal with that one. Okay, Ella, big shout out to you, inviting Iskra. And look at that, Iskra got a shout out and she didn't even do anything. Okay, okay, Carlos says, hi to everyone, hope you're well at home. Don't keep up. So I think basically he's saying, maybe don't stay up. We've got a house and a moon there. Not quite sure what he's getting at there, but hey, that's kind of fun. Okay, Yankan says, can you tell us more about the study permits for international students for fall term 2020 from Sri Lanka? You can still apply, okay? The rules are such that as international students can still apply. If the program, like if you when it comes to a study permit, you need to apply for that study permit. There are restrictions, right? And this is some of the biggest issues. If you have not yet received your study permit, then the question becomes, can you start your program online before you actually get the study permit? Here's the issue that I have with this, and it's more practical advice, okay? It's more practical advice than it is legal. So distinguish the two. So this is me just musing about study permits. If you are an international student and your school is not meeting physically, and you start your program, pay the money, start taking the classes online before you get your study permit, there is still a chance, you guys, that when everything is lifted, your study permit application is submitted, that immigration decides to refuse. And then you've got this money sunk into a program. Maybe they allow you to continue taking it online. Maybe they don't. But when it comes to pursuing any of this, unless I have the study permit in hand, or in other words, I am well underway, I have serious reservations starting a program before the study permit is issued. Now, that's not law. And there's lots of people out there that are telling you, go ahead, start your program, the study permit will be issued later. The only reason it's not being issued is because of biometrics or whatever it might be. Well, if an officer actually looked at it and then refused it, then what are you going to do? So that's just a practical pointer that I'm bringing up. It's not legal. It doesn't impact anything other than just common sense practical advice, because there's no guarantee that just because you've started school that a study permit is going to be issued. And I'll tell you, not many education agents tell you that. So, and not many schools do either. They're happy to take your money, trust me. So be cautious. If some of you are in this situation, you're not sure, I can't canvass every possible permutation of this issue. It's huge, it's massive. I recommend you guys get over to study permit law. And actually, I'm going to give a shout out for this because it's a big deal. Many people don't realize this exists. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to open up my own Facebook page. You can see all the stuff I've got going on here in my personal one. But I have a site called Study Permit Law. And so if you're looking at study situations and questions about studying in Canada, this is where you go. Go to my Study Permit Law group and post and talk. I just did, just the other day, a little update for people. And there wasn't a lot of people that were online because not many people understand that this group even exists. But go over there, subscribe. Let's get this group going. Just like and you can see that the number of people right now that are in this group are, we're just over 1,000 members. Okay, so there's a lot of people that are a part of it. Go in there, post your questions. Let's share our thoughts. Let's, and I'm going to try to jump on periodically and answer questions in there. Those of you who know the Express Entry Law group, this one right here, which started everything that I'm doing right now, it's been sitting at 124,000 forever. And Facebook just doesn't allow, and actually they've been even dropping people off. So even though I have 68 new members just this week, the numbers have actually been going down. So they're like just dropping people off. So, and there's lots of information being posted here. And yeah, so I just wanted to give you guys a shout out about both of those groups too. Don't forget, those exist. They're there to help you. All right, let's see what else we've got going on here. I'm going to shift back here. We're just about out of time, guys, but I want to answer a few more questions from all of you amazing listeners who are tuning in. Okay, let's get back up here. Okay. Okay, so Masood, it's long, just like I said, because the officers and the visa offices being closed overseas and not having officers to do things. Rami, like I said, I don't think there's going to be another federal draw for a while, not until travel restrictions are lifted. In fact, I see Canadian Experience class draw happening and maybe even a score as low as 436 or lower. You guys can do the math. Okay, Vivi says, can I reapply for a visitor visa as my current visitor record is extending in mid-July? My in-Canada sponsorship is still in process. If you're in Canada, yes, you are. You're absolutely going to go through and you're going to extend that. If you need any help, we can help you with that. But yes, you are going to apply to extend. You're not going to just hope your in-Canada sponsorship is going to be finalized. Now, I do want to let you guys know something. Hopefully, Vivi, you've applied for that open work permit because all of my clients, I always include that if they're in an in-Canada application. Why would you not take advantage of the possibility of getting an open work permit? Now, those processing times will, yes, like we don't see a lot of movement, but versus a visitor record where you can't work. Well, subject to work. That's your ability to work in areas that don't actually require a work permit. All right. Clara says, can a person with a postgrad from UBC work in other provinces? Absolutely. If you've got your postgrad work permit, you can work anywhere you want in Canada. I would look carefully at the pathways to permanent residence. And if you've studied in one province, sometimes there are postgraduate permanent resident options that flow from the location where you studied. So, for example, if you went to school in BC and you've got this job offer in Alberta, well, the Alberta Opportunity Stream doesn't show a lot of flexibility in terms of who they give nominations to. Options often are better in the existing province where you actually studied. But always keep the end in mind. Always think about, where do I want to be in the end and how am I going to get there? So versus, hey, this is a great job, I'm just going to take it. So always think about the long term. Okay, Seema says, if we go for online university based in Canada, is it countable under the process of permanent residency with this travel restriction? Okay, so online university based in Canada. So understand, when it comes to this calculation and whether or not you can count that experience towards express entry, that's something that I don't have an answer for right now. That is something that at this stage, I have not seen immigration being willing to count that necessarily. But understand, well, let me qualify this. I'm going to back up. If your program is in Canada, you complete 50% outside and 50% inside, they will give you credit for that Canadian educational credential, even though you don't have that time all of the time specifically in Canada. So they will show kindness in quantifying the program. For instance, if you've completed a degree in Canada and you had 1 year outside of Canada, they're not going to say, sorry, that degree, we're only going to give you points for a 2-year diploma. That's not how it's going to work. Okay. All right. Good question. Okay, so Neil says, I'm planning to include an LOE along with exchange rates to address fluctuating exchange rates for proof of funds, but Pakistan currency is not available in Bank of Canada website. What are other IRCC approved currency conversion sources that I could rely on? Use whatever you can find. Use whatever you can find. I know the Bank of Canada only has certain ones in there, so just use one that's reputable. You can just Google. There is no one correct or incorrect one. They're all pretty close, so you've got flexibility there. Okay, we've got someone who's going to do a soft landing next month in Ontario. How can I obtain a health card on an immediate basis? You need to figure that out. When it comes to the provinces, I'm trying to remember. That's a good question. Health coverage immediately. Some provinces have waived that 90-day waiting period. I can't remember if Ontario has or not. Maybe some of you have, or you know if Ontario has waived that mandatory waiting period. But for provinces like BC, I'm pretty sure they have, but you'll need to just check with Ontario as to whether or not they've done that. Okay. Okay, so Jan says, received a letter of offer, basically a letter of admission from a college. Classes will be held online this coming fall. Should I apply for a student visa now or should I wait? Apply now. Apply. All right, and then we got a lot of hearts here. We'll give a shout out there. And okay, Kabir says, hello. I would like to know that when do I have to contact IRCC in case I don't receive my PR card? What happens if it is lost or not delivered at all? What if I have waited for more than 200 days? Please advise. It's a web form. You reach out to the IRCC web form, or if you're in Canada, the call center. So those are the two avenues that you use. Okay. Bebek says, should I date the letter of explanation and whom shall it be addressed to? I don't worry about who it's addressed to, really. I don't. The date, I don't even worry so much about the date, I'll be honest, because it's all going to be date stamped when you submit your EAPR. All right. And then we've got someone asking about news on FSW draws just once again, and we'll end with this one. There are so many questions, guys. I wish I could get through all of them, but it's just not going to be possible. I'm going to probably try to go on after and just go in and try to respond to a lot of the questions that you guys have put in written form. So pay attention to that. It's a little bit more difficult on YouTube to respond, but I'll try to do what I can to respond to all the many people who've posted comments. But I've got a consult here in about 4 minutes, so I don't want to keep them waiting, and I hope today was helpful. I do the very best I can to try to give information that's helpful to all of you guys. There's multiple reasons why I do it. One is I just want to give. As an immigration lawyer, I became an immigration lawyer versus a corporate, a corporate lawyer or an M&A lawyer in a big global firm. I left that because I wanted to work with people. I wanted to make a difference in the lives of people. And that is the primary purpose for what I'm doing here. This doesn't line my pockets with money, despite what people think. It doesn't. But it does give me exposure. It does help people to see who I am. And when they do choose to hire a lawyer, any immigration representative, they'll know me. Right? Hopefully they like what I'm doing, and they'll trust that I know what I'm doing. That's why I do this the way I do. That's why I don't have these fancy pre-recorded, like some of the consultants out there with their fancy YouTube channels. That's why I don't do these pre-recorded things. Now I am going to start some tips of the day that I'm working through, and you'll see those that will be recorded little tips. But these types of videos, the value is showing you guys that I do know what I'm doing. And, there's nothing that helps to social proof whether this guy online, and I'm a Canadian immigration lawyer. I'm not an immigration consultant. I'm a Canadian immigration lawyer. I was an ex-immigration officer working on the border. And I also worked downtown with the hearings officers with these spousal appeals. So I volunteered as a pro bono student with them while I was going through law school. And I was a former high school teacher, which pulls all of those skills and all of those experiences together to create this. But no, I don't have fancy videos with fancy lighting, and I now finally have a camera that's a little bit nicer. But but my firm wasn't based on generating all these money. I make enough to support my family, my 4 children, 2 in university, my wife, and my 2 other children that are in high school. Supporting them, being a dad for them, and supporting my mother, who is on her own, who has been a widow for, since 1989, when my father passed away on the farm when we were living there. And so I've taken that as a serious responsibility. So that's why I do what I do. And yes, when you guys come online, you watch what I'm doing, you see that I'm genuine. I hate that stupid word authentic, whatever, blah, blah. The reality is I just want you to trust that I actually care. And as long as you can feel that through the camera, then that's really all that's important to me. And then the purpose behind this, and my client is trying to call in right now, but that's the purpose why I do everything that I do. So hopefully you guys see it, and if you either book a consult if you need help. That's a whole different discussion on people who wait until the last minute and then there's nothing that I can do to help them. It's by far better to book that consult, ask the questions, get them answered, and then going forward. And then you know what you can or can't do. And then I also appreciate the people who say, look, Mark, I just want you to be by my side. I just want you to help me. I'm controlling my application myself, but I need your guidance. I need your ongoing support to make sure everything is done properly. And then I'll take it and I'll submit it. That's what I do. All right, guys, this is Canadian immigration lawyer, ex-immigration officer, and former high school teacher Mark Holthe signing off, wishing you guys all the best as you navigate this crazy world of COVID-19. All right, guys, thanks so much.